My sister skipped my wedding to elope with my husband's troubled cousin, then demanded I help her sue him after learning he was a deceptive addict. For context, I got married last week, and on my wedding day, my younger sister, Emily, 24, who was supposed to be my maid of honor, ditched me to secretly wed my husband's problematic cousin. Emily and I, 27, have always had a turbulent relationship. When things are good, they are amazing, but when we clash, it gets intense. This dynamic has defined our bond for years, yet despite our ups and downs, we've always cared deeply for each other. That's why, despite our frequent spats, we stayed connected even after moving out of our parents' house. Looking back, I realize our relationship was somewhat unhealthy, but it was what we knew, and we worked to remain part of each other's lives, even if we often irritated one another. The root of our conflicts, I believe, lies in how different we are as people. Emily has always been impulsive and free-spirited, while I'm the opposite, organized, meticulous, and always planning ahead. These differences often clashed, but when my parents suggested making her my maid of honor to strengthen our bond, I warmed to the idea after some persuasion. I've been with my husband for 4 years, and we got engaged earlier this year. Originally, I didn't plan on having bridesmaids or a maid of honor. I'm not someone with a large circle of close friends, partly by choice and partly because I'm not great at staying in touch. My husband and I wanted a small, intimate wedding, so we initially decided against a bridal party. But my parents convinced me that having Emily as my maid of honor would be special, and after some thought, I agreed. When I asked her, she was thrilled, and since I wasn't having other bridesmaids, I figured she'd be enough. The months leading up to the wedding were enjoyable, and Emily and I got along surprisingly well, so I never suspected she'd pull off what she did on my wedding day. Instead of supporting me as my maid of honor, she vanished, only to reappear that evening with her new husband, my husband's shady cousin, Mark, 36. Mark, who's been divorced twice, had been flirting with Emily in the weeks before the wedding, which I found unsettling given their 12-year age gap and his recent divorce. I call him shady because, according to my husband, Mark has a history of making women uncomfortable. For clarity, Mark wasn't invited to our wedding. My husband doesn't get along with him, and he's not well liked by most of the family, except his parents. However, we made the mistake of inviting his parents to an informal family brunch we hosted 2 weeks before the wedding. For some reason, they brought Mark along. Not wanting to cause a scene, we let him stay, assuming he'd behave. That's when he and Emily met. I noticed them flirting at the brunch, with Emily sitting next to him the whole time. I wasn't okay with it, knowing Mark's reputation, but I thought it was a one-time thing and didn't bring it up later. I was preoccupied with wedding planning and didn't think their interaction would escalate. After the brunch, my father-in-law told his brother, Mark's father, that while we tolerated Mark's presence that day, he wasn't welcome at the wedding since he wasn't close to us. Mark's parents weren't thrilled but agreed to respect our wishes. Unbeknownst to us, Emily and Mark had exchanged numbers and were texting daily since the brunch. Emily never mentioned this to me, and I didn't ask, assuming nothing serious was happening. Had she told me, I would have warned her about Mark's character. Instead, 5 days before my wedding, Mark applied for a marriage license and convinced Emily to elope with him. He pitched the idea of both sisters getting married on the same day as something memorable, and Emily fell for it. The night before my wedding, she snuck out of her hotel to meet Mark, and we only realized she was gone the next morning when her room was empty, and she wasn't answering calls or texts. After confirming with the hotel staff that she'd checked out the previous night, I decided to proceed with my wedding. It was clear she'd chosen to prioritize something else, and I wasn't going to let her absence ruin my day. My husband and parents helped lift my spirits, and by the end of the event, I'd nearly forgotten about her. That evening, Emily showed up with Mark, announcing they'd gotten married. I was furious and told her I was done with her for nearly derailing my wedding with her reckless behavior. She had the nerve to act like I was overreacting, expecting me to be happy that she'd found her soulmate. Only Emily, Mark, and his parents seemed thrilled about their marriage. The rest of us were appalled, not just because they eloped on my wedding day, but because they expected us to celebrate it. A heated argument broke out that night, after which Emily, Mark, and his parents stormed off. I hadn't spoken to them since and was honestly fine with that. A week after our weddings, while my husband and I were enjoying our new life together, Emily was miserable. She showed up at my house, distraught, saying Mark wasn't the man she thought he was. During their 2 weeks of knowing each other, he'd been charming but hid his past. She didn't know he'd been married twice or that he was 12 years older than her. She thought he was in his early 30s, partly because of his good looks. After their marriage, she learned he'd exaggerated his wealth, inviting her to a friend's fancy house to impress her. In reality, he lived in a small, run-down apartment in a rough neighborhood. Worst of all, she discovered Mark was a drug addict, specifically hooked on Dr. G, a fictional drug for this retelling. He'd been high during their entire courtship, when they met, when he proposed, when they got married, everything. Emily tried to make the marriage work for a week but couldn't cope with the reality of who he was. Mark refused to let her leave, claiming she was his soulmate and that he could change with her support. But Emily wasn't willing to stay. She packed her things while he was passed out and left, unable to handle his emotional manipulation whenever she tried to end things. Sobbing as she told me this, Emily admitted she felt foolish for marrying someone she barely knew. I sympathized, but I also thought her impulsiveness played a big role in this mess. She then asked for my help as a lawyer to find a divorce attorney and sue Mark for emotional distress caused by his lies. I refused to take on her lawsuit, not just because of our personal conflict, but because emotional distress is hard to prove in court, and I was busy with clients who had more pressing issues. I offered to connect her with a divorce attorney for an annulment, but that was the extent of my help. This upset her, and she flipped the situation on me, claiming I should have warned her about Mark when I saw them flirting at the brunch. She accused me of letting her fall into this trap because I didn't intervene. I was stunned. She'd kept their relationship a secret, and I had no idea it was serious. I thought their flirtation was a one-off, and even if it wasn't, marrying someone after 2 weeks was her decision. Our argument escalated, with her demanding I help her legally for free because I owed her for not warning her. I refused, and when she wouldn't leave my house, I threatened to call the police, which finally made her go. Since then, she's been relentlessly texting and calling me from burner phones and new accounts, even after I blocked her. My parents are no help. They think I should assist her because she's family and claim I'm victim blaming by holding her accountable. I disagree. I think she's facing the consequences of her own rash choices. Am I wrong for not warning her about Mark and refusing to help with her lawsuit? Update 1 3 days after Emily's visit, she's still driving me up the wall. I don't understand why she feels entitled to my free legal help, but I decided to confront the issue head-on by visiting my parents today. I knew Emily was staying with them since she'd ended her apartment lease right after her marriage and couldn't return after a dispute with her landlord. She also wasn't going back to Mark, so our parents' house was her only option. When I arrived, Emily answered the door and immediately slammed it in my face. I waited patiently until my mom let me in. Emily had locked herself in her room, refusing to see me, which was odd since she kept pestering me for help. I explained to my parents how she'd been harassing me and asked them to intervene. To my surprise, they revealed they'd already connected her with a lawyer to sue Mark for emotional distress and were working on her separation. So she didn't even need my legal assistance. When I asked why she was still bothering me, they said she just wanted me to admit I was wrong. She believed I should have warned her about Mark and felt I owed her an apology. I refused. I wasn't responsible for her choices. I explained that I was preoccupied with my wedding and didn't think her flirtation with Mark was serious. I got frustrated repeating myself, and my voice rose. My parents looked worn out and said they didn't want to mediate our conflict. They expected us to resolve it like adults, as we always had. However, they sided with Emily, saying she felt I hadn't looked out for her as her older sister. They thought I was too harsh, given her current struggles, and accused me of victim blaming. They also called me out for raising my voice at them, saying if I continued, I should leave to avoid drama. I felt they were unfairly painting me as the villain, but I didn't want to escalate further, so I left. At home, I discussed it with my husband, who supports me. I'm frustrated with how my family is handling this and feel cornered, but I still believe I'm not wrong. I'm exhausted and just want things to return to normal. Update 2 weeks after my visit to my parents, there's been no contact from Emily or them. I was upset but decided to focus on my upcoming honeymoon and move forward. I knew I wasn't at fault, and with my husband's support, I felt okay letting it go. Today, though, I came home to find my parents, Emily, and my husband waiting for me in the living room. Unexpectedly, Emily rushed to hug me, holding on for nearly 2 minutes. I was shocked but hugged her back, and we both ended up in tears. Despite everything, she's still my sister, the little girl who always looked up to me. This was our worst fight in years, but families are there to pull you through tough times. She apologized profusely, admitting she was wrong to blame me and had been looking for a scapegoat because she couldn't face her own mistakes. She even convinced our parents they were wrong to side with her. We had a long talk about the past few weeks. My parents apologized for making me the bad guy and promised to do better. They got emotional, and I realized the 2 weeks of silence had been hard for them too. I haven't fully forgiven them, but I want to give them a chance because family matters. Whether this is the right call, time will tell, but I'm willing to try. Emily is moving forward with her divorce, which is progressing smoothly. She dropped the lawsuit against Mark, realizing it would be too difficult to prove. She admitted her recklessness caused this and hopes this lesson will make her more responsible. I'm glad she's learning from it. Before they left, my parents and Emily surprised me by pooling money to help fund our honeymoon as a gesture to make amends. After some hesitation, I accepted, touched by their effort. My husband and I are excited for the trip and hope things with my family continue to improve. Update 3, it's been nearly 2 years since my last update, and I felt compelled to share some news. My husband and I are expecting, and I'm in my second trimester. Things with my family have turned out wonderfully since our fallout. Emily and I still have occasional disagreements, but nothing as severe as before, and we always work through them. Everyone is thrilled about the baby, especially Emily, who's excited to be an aunt. She's been incredibly supportive, visiting often, reading parenting books with me, and being there every step of the way. My parents and in-laws are overjoyed to become grandparents, and I'm grateful I gave my family a second chance. My baby will be surrounded by love, just as I am, and I wouldn't trade this for anything.